This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hey, Noah here. I'm a former architectural designer and now working on developing my indie game Chef RPG. In this video, I want to design a retro-futuristic house for a character in Chef RPG. It's been a while since I designed a proper building on this channel, so I thought it would be cool to show the full design process and talk about the things that architects think about when designing a house. I'll be designing the house for the character Angie, who is a young android man. My character designer gave him the background of being a sheltered boy who lives under the care of his wealthy adopted mother. So we will be designing a big mansion with 2 people inside. Since the mother is the real owner of the house, the decor and style of the house should follow the mother's personality rather than Angie. So let's get started. Before we create any concepts, we need a location for this home, so that we can have an idea of the topography that we are building on. I decided the house will be located at a very high elevation, on top of some rocky cliffs. The house will be built on these uneven rocks and would have a great view over everything in the distance. I thought it would be interesting if the mother was fascinated by retrofuturism, and her whole house displays her love for this style, almost to a tacky degree. Retrofuturism is an art movement that represents what a future looks like when depicted from the past. If we look at some of these artworks, we can see that it draws a lot of its aesthetic from the American Golden Age, which were around the 1950s. This really famous illustration depicts retrofuturism really well. An idealized American family cruising down the highway in a self-driving car. It's a technologically advanced future with the aesthetics still based in the 1950s. There's usually a sense that the future is a utopia where technology has allowed humans to live a more relaxing life. A video game that represents retrofuturism quite well is Fallout. In Fallout, you have advanced technologies like nuclear-powered house robots, giant airships, and laser guns, but the design, the clothing, the sounds, and the general atmosphere are based on a 1950s America. Real-world examples of retrofuturism include buildings like the Seattle Space Needle and the theme building in LAX. Overall, it's a very charming art movement that also gives off a sense of utopia, which I think works well for the characters I am designing the house for. After we have a good understanding of the site and the people who we are designing the house for, we begin a design by creating a design concept. This would take the form of a sketch or a diagram that describes the main ideas of your design. So for example, I could design a building that follows the landscape, in which case we end up with a building that flows along the terrain and molds itself to the mountain. Since the aesthetics of retrofuturism aren't exactly subtle, I would need a different concept. The house should really pop out from the landscape rather than hide itself within the landscape. If we look at images of retrofuturism, there seems to be this sense of flight. There are a lot of vehicles with forms reminding me of flying saucers. The buildings kind of have these wings like they're about to take off. So with this idea, I came up with the concept of a house ascending up the mountain in a series of 3 steps. The 3 steps make up the 3 floors of the house. We can use some similar wing structures in the form of the house to give it that retrofuturistic feeling. Let's see what these stacked volumes will look like. I'm just quickly sketching out one design by hand. I like the overall form of it, so let's throw it into Photoshop and we can draw the pixel art version of it. The color matters a lot here. I'm trying to choose colors that have a surreal and utopia-like feeling. We should avoid dark colors and instead, lighter colors like white, orange, red, and light blue are better for creating the feeling I want. So now we have this first building design, which is functional, but aesthetically, it's kind of boring. I think the problem is that all 3 steps are the same style, so there's just too much repetition here. We should have a 3rd floor volume that contrasts against this light rounded shape. Something with a bit more edge, maybe with a darker color. So this new shape is kind of interesting. It breaks the uniformity of the previous design, but still feels too plain and boring. I want this house to pop out more, and make a design that would make people look twice. I still like the overall feel of the bottom 2 steps though, so let's redesign the top volume. If we look at these retrofuturistic images again, a recurring theme seems to be the depictions of vehicles. Vehicles play a big role in our transition from the past to a more advanced future. What if we literally put a vehicle on top of this house? We can imagine some sort of retired spacecraft shell that the builders managed to haul on top of this structure to make the final floor. Maybe it can have the shape of a flying saucer, but stretch longer. So I think this shows promise, but it currently kind of looks like a very long cowboy hat. The pink color is interesting since it gives it this surreal look. The shape of the vehicle isn't working though, so let's change that. I think it needs to be a bit bulkier on the top side. So now it looks a bit better. It kind of looks like a giant mushroom cap right now, but we still need to add windows and details to it. We'll do a row of windows around the entire structure with circle windows on the sides. I think this is pretty interesting. It provides a big contrast against the 2 lower levels, something that the other 2 designs weren't able to achieve. Now, we need some vertical elements to balance out the visual composition of the building. Looking at real retrofuturistic architecture, we can see that a recurring theme is the use of curved arches and columns. These structures are always smooth with a minimalist design. So for the house, we can create a series of curved columns that hold up the structure, which will make it more visually interesting. We can have one large column at the end to hold up the spacecraft. And since we already have a spacecraft sitting on top of this house, let's go all the way. We can add a big fin on top of the ship and add some chimneys that move up and down to pump out smoke. This just helps the top of the structure look less flat. Before jumping ahead, I want to take a minute to talk about this video's sponsor, Squarespace, an all-in-one platform for hosting and building websites. They have a ton of great templates that you can choose from, and I recently used Squarespace to create a website for Chef RPG. What surprised me was the amount of customization available, and you can mix and match different templates to create pages suited to your needs. Squarespace lets you insert short videos, so I put one right at the front page, which looks pretty cool. They have a great automated image scaling system, so I never have to worry about if images or videos are cropped incorrectly. Scrolling down, we have a system for collecting emails, which can be linked to Squarespace's emailing system if you ever need to send out important updates. They also have great portfolio tools that automatically adjust the layouts, which allowed me to create a screenshots page where you can click and enlarge individual images. It's definitely a useful platform for artists and designers looking to create an online portfolio, or game developers looking to make a website for their game. If you are interested, check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/pixelarchitect to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Now back to the video. Now let's populate the rest of the scene. I'm essentially treating this scene as a still painting. The house may be the main focus, but the landscape, the pathways, and the sky are just as important for the aesthetic experience. If we go with orange as the primary color for the scene, we get this kind of surreal feeling for the scene, which is just what I'm looking for. Angie and the mother are living in this dreamlike utopia, which would be part of a wealthy neighborhood. Finally, for the path leading up to the house, I thought it'd be cool if we use a glass tube, similar to the ones from the Pompidou Center in Paris. Although the Pompidou Center is not an example of retrofuturism, these glass tubes still evoke some sense of that early space age design. So there we have it. The exterior of the house is complete. The spaceship third level immediately stands out. Once we add some animated plants and people into the scene, we can get a better idea of what it feels like. The next step is designing the interior. Since we designed this house from the outside in, the floor plan and location of the windows should follow the exterior. Let's start by drawing an outline of the existing walls with openings. Next, we need to decide what the programs are. Since we have 2 people living in it, we'll just stick to having 2 bedrooms and 2 washrooms. We will also need a living room, a kitchen, and a dining room. Fairly standard stuff. In the game, Angie will eventually open a shop in this house, so we'll need a big flexible space so that he can set up a shop. Now that we understand the required programs, we can begin assigning these rooms to different floors. If we have a shop in the house, it's probably best if it was on the ground level, so it will be easier for customers to come and go and not disrupt the rest of the house. Now, I want the interior of the spaceship level to become a very fun and desirable space to be in. We can imagine that this is where you bring guests to for a party. In this case, the living room, the kitchen, and the dining room should be located inside the 3rd level, while the middle level will be more of a private level used for sleeping. Since the house has a somewhat irregular layout, with the living room being above the bedrooms rather than below, we will need to design a unique circulation system to avoid disrupting the bedroom level. Placing stairs in the middle of the floor plan probably won't be a good idea. Instead, we can move the vertical circulation to the outside of the house. That way you can go directly to the 3rd floor without having to set foot in the 2nd floor. Since we have these glass tubes on the exterior, we might as well continue with them for the house stairs as well. You essentially leave the main house and enter the glass tube and return to the house on your desired level. Now that the vertical circulation is solved, we can finish up with the circulation of each floor. The ground level will have a simple and open design, so we can have a straight line from the entrance to the stairs, with any furniture placed on either side. On the 2nd level, we can also have a straight line from the stairs. This doesn't lead anywhere, but it divides the mother's room from Angie's room. We should have a bedroom, a washroom, and a closet for each. The 3rd level is a bit less straightforward. Since the spaceship has windows on all sides, I think the ideal design would be to keep the entire room very open. We can have circulation wrap around the outside perimeter and have all the functions in the middle. We can imagine that the mother will throw parties here for her guests, so we should have a dining room with multiple tables, a big kitchen, and a big living room in this space. I'm going to jump through the drawing phase fairly quickly. To create a retro-futuristic feeling in the interior, it's mostly about colors and shapes. The textures and forms in retrofuturism are fairly simple. It's essentially minimalism with curves and colors. Since this is a huge house, the spaces should feel more open instead of crowded with furniture. Here, I'm struggling with the material palette of the spaceship interior. I want to give it a different texture than the floors below and give it a bit more complexity. However, a regular wood color doesn't really work here. It needs to be more of a vibrant and hip space rather than have an older traditional look, which is what wood implies. I finally settled on having a redwood floor, faded walls, and a mixture of tile and carpet in the middle. For the kitchen and dining rooms, to capture that retro feeling, I decided to use these grid tiles that you can typically see in American diner cars. The style of the kitchen counter and dining tables will also follow that diner car aesthetic. We have a lounge area with a freestanding fireplace that people can sit around. After throwing in some furniture, the drawing is done. So that's pretty much it. Let's import everything into Unity and we can do a walkthrough. This process took a bit longer than expected since there were so many furniture items. This will likely be the largest character house in the game, which makes sense since it's located in a wealthy neighborhood. This will eventually be part of a much bigger scene, but for now, we can only arrive through these tubes. We have this big open balcony, which I might turn into a small parking lot. We can have some retro-style flying cars parked here in the future. The pumps on the house all seem to be working. The moving parts give the house a bit more life, and the rising smoke gives it a dreamy feel. Now let's head inside. The first floor will eventually be turned into a shop. For now, I placed a couple furniture items around the space so it operates as a second living room. We have more couches here on the right side with some bar tables. When we head towards the stairs, I made it so that the walls fade away so your view won't be obstructed. Up in the second level, it's more of a private and intimate space, so the rooms are smaller and there are more furniture and corridors. We have the mother's room, which is very large, with a large closet. And Angie's rooms on the other side are a bit smaller but still possess the same style, which was all selected by the mother. Now let's head to the third floor. The third level is very different and much more open. It's basically one big party room, kind of like those you see in giant modern mansions. On the right side, we have the freestanding fireplace for people to sit around and relax. These spaces look great when there are a lot of people in it, not so good if you're the only person inside. So I think for the final game, I might program it so that there are always a lot of random people inside the house to make it feel livelier. So that's about it. This is the largest character house in the game, so I'm very happy that it's finally done. I hope you enjoyed seeing the design process for a whole house. It's been a while since I've designed a full building or done any unique architectural designs, so this was very fun for me. We are still going full steam ahead with development of Chef RPG, and we'll be jumping onto the main story and character quests very soon. So hopefully I can show some of that progress in a future devlog. Thanks for watching and see you next time.